All right, so let's get started with the practical demonstration. I'm just going to switch over to my Ubuntu virtual machine, and we can begin by installing Wireshark, configuring it, and we can take a look at a few examples and essentially get an understanding of how to use it. We'll then be exploring or analyzing some malicious or some Pcap files with malicious traffic or packets. So I'll see you in a couple of seconds. Alright, so I'm back within my Ubuntu virtual machine and I'm currently on the Wireshark website. So I just wanted to highlight this before we actually get started. So, on the website itself, you have the ability to download Wireshark, learn Wireshark. So I definitely recommend taking a look at the documentation if you're not familiar with something. In addition to that, Wireshark also has its own video series which will explain, how to use Wireshark. But again, we are primarily focused on how to use Wireshark from the perspective of a blue team operator or a security analyst, if you will. All right, so you can click on download and, it'll give you various options based on your platform. So again, if you click on the latest stable release, there we are. You can see you have the Windows installer, the Windows portable app. You then have the macOS DMG images right over here. Now, if you're working on Linux, which I assume you are, then you can download or install Wireshark directly from your terminal, regardless of what package manager you're using. So on Ubuntu, Ubuntu is based on Debian, which means I can install it by through the use of the aptitude package manager. So I can say sudo apt get install and Wireshark. Right, so that's the name of the package. So if you're on Arch Linux, you can say sudo pacman-s Wireshark, and if you're on CentOS or Fedora, you can use the yum package manager, and the package name itself is just Wireshark. Now, I already have Wireshark installed, but let's see if we have an update. We don't have an update, so I'm running the latest version of Wireshark. Now, I currently have Wireshark pinned to my actual dock here. And let me just show you what happens here. So I'm currently running as a standard user. So you can see right over here, I'm not root. This user is part of the sudo group. However, I just want to show you what happens when you essentially launch Wireshark through an unprivileged user, or if you launch Wireshark without sudo privileges. So I'll just open up Wireshark here, and it's going to take a couple of seconds. And there we are. So welcome to Wireshark. Now, on the greeting page or the welcome page of Wireshark, you'll immediately be provided with the capture filter bar right over here. That's the text field right over there. And you can see that it's going to display all your interfaces. Now, because we didn't start it with sudo or root privileges, we don't have the ability to capture packets. And that's because the ability to capture packets is limited to users with sudo privileges. So that means that we need to launch it with sudo or through the root account. So what I'm going to do is I'll open up my terminal here and I can say sudo Wireshark and I'll hit enter, and that's going to start Wireshark as root, which is perfectly fine. And now you can see it's going to list out all your network interfaces. Now, as I said, this is running through a virtual machine on a NAT network. And that means that the connection is essentially a virtualized Ethernet connection, and there are other systems on this network. And my interface name is ENP0S3. And of course, I can confirm that by opening up a new window here. And if I type in ifconfig, you can see that my default interface, and let me just bring that back here, is ENP0S3. My IP address, or the IP address of the Ubuntu virtual machine, is 10.10.10.31. All right, so that means that we can start capturing traffic from that interface. So let me just navigate in there, and I can immediately just click on it. And so if I click on it, you can see there's also a graph here that highlights the network activity. And if you hover over it, it'll tell you your IP address or the IP address associated with that interface. Now, before we get into display filters and capture filters, let's just click on the interface. All right, so if you double click on it, it's going to start capturing traffic. Now, as I said, this NAT network doesn't have, it really doesn't have that much going on in regards to traffic, but you can already tell that we've begun capturing, a few packets. Right, so this is essentially how Wireshark will display all the packets that have been captured, and the default user interface is going to be split into 3 panes. All right, so you have your packet list pane, which as the name suggests, will simply display a list of packets that have been captured. And the packet list pane has the following columns. Now this, as I said, is the default configuration. We're going to be customizing this. So by default, you're going to have the packet number, the time, that's essentially when this packet was sent, the source IP address, so that's where this packet has been sent from, and the destination, that's where it's being sent to. The protocol is NBSS in this case, so that just tells you what protocol is what the actual protocol for this particular packet. So if it's a TCP packet, it'll tell you there. If it's a TLS packet, it'll tell you that there, and of course ARP, so on and so forth. You should be familiar with the protocols. You then have the length, that essentially tells you the length of the data contained within a packet, and the information, which we'll get to. So these are the default columns here. And let's take a look at the top bar. But before we do that, let's take a look at some of the other panes. All right, so the second pane is the packet details pane. So this is, as the name suggests, will display the details for a packet that you have selected. So I currently selected the first packet that we captured. If I select another one, you can see that it essentially displays the details for that individual packet. This is known as packet dissection. So what Wireshark is doing for you here is it's providing you with the ability to select a packet that you'd like to analyze. And then within the actual packet details pane, you can essentially identify or view the various layers of the OSI model. So, you have your data link layer, and then of course you have your network layer, your transport layer, session layer, and then you have your application layer, and then your presentation layer. So based on the type of packet you select, you're then going to be provided with details regarding that packet. So you can see this starts off from the frame. So, we have the data link layer, and then of course we have the network layer where we have IP. That's the actual protocol. So if it's UDP, that will also be highlighted there. So you can see you have UDP there as well. And that's because the protocol in this case is DHCP. If we click on the TCP packet, that is highlighted correctly there. So yeah, you have the ability to essentially go through all the layers of the OSI model, and you can then, click on the individual. You can click on each of these layers and identify the data, or the various the various pieces of data associated with that layer. And really from our perspective, what we're interested in, or the 2 layers we're going to be interested in, is going to be the internet protocol, or this layer right over here. And then of course we are we're also going to be exploring the protocols. So just to summarize, from the top, you have your data link layer, which again, you typically associate with Ethernet. So this is where you have your frames. You then have your network layer, right, which is where you have IP, right, or ICMP. It could be IPsec or IGMP, right? You then have your transport layer, which is where you'd have protocols like TCP or UDP. So the transport layer is typically used for end-to-end connections. If there is a session layer, that will also be displayed. If there is a presentation layer for protocols like like SSH, FTP, etc., that'll also be displayed. And of course, you have your application layer, which will display protocols like HTTP, SSH, DNS, and so this will make sense as we progress. And the final pane is right over here. This is the one at the bottom here. That's going to be your packet bytes pane, which essentially displays the actual data or content within a particular layer in ASCII, and you also have your it's essentially sorted by default as hex, right? So you can also display it as ASCII, or you can just show the text based on the packet by right clicking on it. You can also display it as a hex stream if you wanted to, and in this case we'll just stay with the defaults. As I said, this might be a little bit confusing at this point, but it'll start making sense. All right, so that is essentially the interface here. Now let's take a look at the top bar. So we've already started the actual capture, and if this button is grayed out, that means that it's still capturing packets. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom, this is the latest packet that was captured, right? You have the ability to stop the live traffic capture or packet capture. So I can stop that there, and now you can see I have the ability to resume or to start a new packet capture again. Now I can also restart the current the current packet capture if I wanted to, and this little cogwheel right over here allows me to essentially specify the capture options, where I have the ability to specify the interface I would like to essentially capture with. And if you take a look at the actual column here, let me just resize that and reorganize it. You can see that we have the interface name, the link layer header, so that tells you the type of connection. If it's a wireless connection, it'll tell you that there, and promiscuous mode, right? So if this is checked, then that means you can essentially intercept or capture traffic that is being sent on the network for other devices, which is exactly what we were able to do when we ran the actual live packet capture. And if you're capturing on a wireless network, then monitor mode will be enabled if your network adapter supports it, right? And then it'll also tell you whether a capture filter has been applied right over here. And you also have the ability to enable promiscuous mode on all interfaces, right? So as it says, you probably want to enable this. Usually a network card will only capture the traffic sent to its own network address. If you want to capture all traffic that the network card can see, mark this option, and you can see the FAQ section for some more details regarding, the actual promiscuous mode. You then have the output options, where you can essentially capture to a Pcap file immediately, and the output format that you're provided with is Pcap next generation or Pcap, the standard Pcap format, which is what I recommend. In our case, we really don't want to be saving to a file unless we have identified some important information, and we would like to export that traffic into a Pcap file. You then have the options here. Again, this essentially allows you to resolve MAC addresses, resolve network names, which I would recommend you enable. And you can also show the capture information during a live capture. I would recommend leaving that unchecked. You can leave all of the other options as they are. You also have the ability to stop, capture after, a specified number of packets, a specified number of files, when the actual capture reaches a specific size or at a fixed duration. So you can say after 10 seconds, I want you to stop the capture, which can be very, very useful. At the bottom, you have your capture filter, which allows you to essentially specify a filter. And based on that filter, that's the only traffic that will be captured. Now, as I said, this is something that I will be walking you through in a couple of seconds, but it's something that you want to avoid whenever you're capturing traffic, because ideally you want to capture all the traffic or all the packets that are being sent on a network and not limit this unless you want to do so. Right? That's where, display filters will come into play. Display filters essentially allow you to filter through the current capture, which again, you're going to be capturing all the traffic. So you can use a display filter to filter through those packets, as opposed to filtering or essentially using a capture filter, which will restrict what is being captured based on the filter you specify. All right, so that's the actual cogwheel there. That's capture options. You then have the ability to open a capture file or a Pcap file. You can save this capture file as a Pcap. So, for example, I can save it on my desktop, and I can specify the format as Wireshark or TCP dump Pcap, specify a name, save it, so on and so forth. I can then close this capture file. So I can say continue without saving, or I have the ability to save it. If I hit enter, you can see that is displayed. I can also reload this file, if I'd made any changes, and if I wanted to go back, I can also find a packet, go to the previous packet or the next packet. I can go to a specified packet, and I can also go to the first packet that was captured, and of course the last packet. You then have the ability to automatically scroll to the last packet during a live capture, which is very useful. And then, of course, this is where the actual coloring rules will come into play, which I'll get to in a second. And of course, one of the most important features is the ability to enlarge the main window text here. as you can see there. And you then have the actual ability to zoom out, right? So what we're going to do here is let's just stop this capture, and I'm just going to go into options, and I'm going to disable the resolve network names option there, and I'll start that again, and that should provide us with the source and destination IP, because before that it was essentially providing us with the host name, which is not bad, but in our case we really don't need it. All right, so now that we have an idea as to the default interface, let's take a look at how to customize this interface. So I'm just going to stop capturing packets. There we are, that's perfectly fine. And let's take a look at how we can customize a couple of aspects in regards to the user interface and the way the actual panes are displayed. And we'll also be exploring the coloring rules for packets, which again is something that we'll constantly be taking a look at as we progress. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start another live packet capture on ENP0S3. That's my default interface. In your case, the name will probably be different. It could be Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1. You get the idea. So I'll double click on that. And let's head over into Edit and into Preferences, right? So this allows you to customize Wireshark, and we are primarily interested in the appearance section at this point in time. So under columns, this is where you can add, you can add to the current columns here under the packet details or the packet list pane, which I'll get to in a second. You then have your font and colors, which again, you can change based on your screen resolution and aspect ratio. And I'll get into how to zoom in a couple of seconds. And you can, of course, change the font and the font size. So for example, I can make that 11 and I can hit OK, and that increases the actual size there. However, I do not want that to be italic or italicized. So I'll just say I want this regular, and I can hit OK, and there we are. Fantastic. So you can see that that increased the size. Now you can also zoom in and out based on your own preference, which again is very helpful. Another useful keyboard shortcut is the Control, Shift and Plus key, which will zoom in. So I can zoom in like so, and I can also zoom out by using the Control and minus key combination. So that looks like it is appropriate. So I'll just zoom in. There we are. Hopefully that's visible to you now. And if we go back, I'm just going to stop the packet capture. If I go back into Edit and Preferences and I click on Layout, you can see that it essentially provides you with various layouts based on your requirements. So based on your screen resolution and the aspect ratio of your monitor, you can essentially sort or essentially modify the way or the layout of your panes. So you can see that, on pane 1, you can specify whether you want a, you can essentially specify what pane you want displayed on pane 1, pane 2, and pane 3. So let me just restore the default. So you can see on pane 1, that is the packet list. That's the packet list pane. On pane 2, we have packet details. On pane 3, we have the packet bytes, or rather the actual packet bytes pane. Now, as for the layout, I can say I want pane 1 to be displayed on top, and I want pane 2 and 3 to be split at the bottom. So if I hit OK, you can now see that that actually, reconfigures the layout here of your panes. And as I said, based on your screen resolution and aspect ratio and your own personal preference, this might work for you. And in my case, I typically like using this in addition to a couple of other ones. So, you can play around with this based on your own preference. You can also have 1 and 2 displayed side by side. I don't recommend doing that. The objective really is to have the packet list pane essentially have its own wide layout, or to have that display information without any restriction, because a lot of data is being displayed there. That is very important during analysis. So I typically use this option or this layout here, or layout 2, right? And as I said, you have the ability to customize what is displayed in pane 1, pane 2, and pane 3. You can also show the packet separator if you want. That is going to add a little line here that again is really cool for visibility, if you are visually impaired in any way. And so I'll just go into preferences there, and I think we can leave that on. I really like that. And of course, you can also show the actual packet number within the status bar, but we're just going to leave that as is. Now, the next aspect of appearance that you can customize is the columns. Now, this is going to be very important for the exercises we'll be exploring. So you can see that it starts off with column 1 all the way to the bottom, which displays information. We want to add a couple of columns to this. You can see we have the time. We also have the source and destination address, the protocol, the length, etc. The first customization we want to change is the actual time. So you can double click on that there. This is going to bring a drop down. So we want to have this displayed in UTC time. So that will provide you with an accurate idea as to what time that packet was sent, because right now it just sends the actual time based on the information it obtained from the packet. We want to add another column for the source port. So that's the new column there. You can click on the title, on the actual title there to change it. So we'll say source port, and we can then click on the type here, and we can then say we're looking for the source port. And that is going to be the unresolved option there. So SRC port, and we can then add the other column, which is going to be the destination port. So I'm going to say destination port, and of course you can use whatever heading you want or whatever title you want. And for the type, we are looking for the destination port. So destination port right over here, unresolved. And we can then select and drag and drop it in regards to where we want it. So I'm just going to have this below the source address. So let me just drag it there. Hopefully it allows me to add it. There we are. So source IP address and source port, and then destination. The destination port can fall under the destination IP address right over here. Fantastic. So we can hit OK, and now you can see we have a few more columns added there. And what you can also do, which is really very helpful, is you can resize this based on your own requirements. You can see that the time is now being displayed in UTC format, and we can resize things. We can resize these columns based on our requirements. One thing I would recommend doing is aligning the actual source and destination ports so that it displays the information in a much more readable format. So you can see that starts to make sense. And you can also do this for the IP addresses so that you can make sure you can read it. I'm just going to get rid of that for the source and destination IP. I only like centering the source and destination port option. And yeah, so this information, as I said, is going to be very, very useful. So you can then resize, this so that everything fits within your screen. And again, you can always zoom out if you want to. So there we are. That's how to add custom columns. Now let's talk a little bit about color coding specific types of packets. All right. So if I go into edit, or rather into view, and I click on the actual coloring rules, the coloring rules menu item here, you can see that the colorize packet list option has been enabled. If I disable it, which I can also do directly from here, you can see that it gets rid of the color coding for the packets. Now, this is something that I don't recommend that you do, primarily because color coding is very important, and Wireshark has its own color coding based on the type of packet. So if I go into view and the color rules, you can see that for specific types of packets like ARP, or for specific protocols like TCP, UDP, ARP, SMB, HTTP, it has its own color codes. And the filter here is the actual display filter. So for example, if an ARP packet is captured, then it will be color coded as this light orange or creamish color. If it's a TCP or UDP port, you're going to have this light magenta or purple color here. And for UDP, it's blue. For SMB, it's going to be yellow. For HTTP, it's green. So I recommend going through these color codes so you understand what's going on. I'll be showing you how to add your own color code and why that is useful in a couple of seconds. All right, so now that we've got an idea as to how to customize the actual panes and how to essentially modify the font, how to add columns, let's get started with display and capture filters. I just want to take a couple of moments to thank our Patreons. Thank you, Michael Hubbard, Dustin Umpress, Jerry Speds, Doozy, Sid Saab, Ryan Carr, Shamir Douglas, Jojo Bibi, Balangos, Kushkev, RS, Nino Buikov, and David Bricker. You guys are really awesome. Thank you very much for supporting us, and you guys make these types of videos possible. So we really appreciate it, and we look forward to producing even more high quality content.